Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back. My name is John Chapman, and I'm the chair for this session. And so kicking off this afternoon's sessions, we have a trio of speakers. Andy Butcher is General Manager in the Public Sector Business Unit at Actions. Alex Gittings is a Professional Services Consultant, also with Actions. And David Jennings is a Network Security Engineer for Nouveau. And they'll be talking to us today about the benefits of a controlled security state and speed to recovery that orchestration and automation can deliver in their talk, Audit, Automate.Network as Code. There will be an opportunity for Q&A at the end of the session, so please submit your questions via the Q&A box and we will answer as many as possible. So sit back and enjoy the next talk. Thank you.
Thank you, John, and good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. I hope you're enjoying the event so far. I'm the General Manager, as John said, of the Public Sector Business Unit at Actions. I've been working with the industry for over 20 years in networking and security, largely around higher education, but very much in the public sector domain. Hopefully many of you know me. I may have even bought a few people a beer at Network Shop in the past. And by the way, if you head over to our virtual stand, you can register for a pub in a box that could be coming your way. Actions deliver network services and security services, product and support to many customers across the public sector. One of those customers is Jisc, who we provide and look after the entire IP backbone based on Juniper. Now, having been in the industry for as long as I have, I can't say that I'm up to speed fully with all of this new automation stuff. So I've asked a couple of my professional service colleagues to join me today to tell us more about how this can affect your speed to recovery. Alex, introduce yourself, please.
Yes, I'm Alex Gittings. Been with Actions around 2 years. I'm a professional services consultant and mainly work on automation technology as well as SD-WAN. Daniel?
My name is Daniel Jennings. I'm from Nouveau. I've been with Nouveau for 6 years, starting off as a junior support engineer, working my way up to senior support into the networking team, and then moving into the security to lead the networking security.
So I'm pleased to say that around 18 months ago, Actions acquired Nouveau Solutions. They are cybersecurity and managed service experts, and they're now in the Actions portfolio. Next slide, please. Okay, so what you'll see here is extracts from a report, State of Network Automation report, that produced by Juniper each year. If you want to get a copy of this, head over to our meeting room where you can download a copy of the report. But what you can see in the report here is that there is automation happening. It's happened really in the last few years. Now at Actions, we've been automating far longer than that. We've used automation to roll out equipment, to provide zero-touch provisioning, and internally for our own operation and orchestration as well. And in fact, some recent research from Global Data highlights automation as is probably the most disruptive technology post-COVID. We can see that there's a lot of people involved in delivering projects, and when you're remote, when you're not hands-on, it's much harder to deliver projects. And so fighting the day-to-day workload is tough. And so automation now is starting to become a main driver. And as Henry said in his opening speech on Tuesday morning, automation is a must in security. You cannot possibly manage the number of security incidents that come your way unless you build some automation in. Next slide, please. So the most common driver for automation in 2019 was already security. Okay, but that's been driven even more now. We've got to try and find ways to reduce our day-to-day workload. And there are various ways that we can do that, but clearly automation can take out the repetitive hard work. It can improve testing, and hopefully today in the session we're going to show you some of the benefits. Next slide, please. Some figures that we grabbed here to show you across the industries who's automating, what the maturity levels are. We wonder why people aren't automating. There's certainly some apprehension to automation. It could be a skills issue. I mean, I can probably still remember how to configure a switch, but automation is something completely brand new to me. And a lot of people don't know what or why to automate. But we all use automation every day. Whenever we ask our Echo Dot or our phone assistant, note I didn't say the names then, to turn the lights on or to see who's at the door, we're using automation. We're using something that's going to deliver a service for us. So hopefully in this presentation, we'll show you the path to that. Next slide, please. So Alex, let's look at the ways you can implement automation, please.
Yeah, so there's several tools out in the market that aid in delivering network automation. Some of the most popular being configuration management tools. One of the most popular configuration management tools is Ansible, as it is relatively easy to get started, and there's a wide adoption within the industry to use it for a multitude of reasons. It allows organizations to be able to manage the configuration of not only network devices, but servers, cloud applications, and many more. Secondly, APIs are relied upon heavily to get going with network automation, whether that's getting information from a device or business applications to determine network state or gather information such as IP addresses or customer circuit information. Thirdly, there's on-box automation, which some vendors support, which allows engineers to be able to run automated practices from within the device itself, such as Juniper's event scripts, SNMP scripts, all that type of good stuff. Finally, containers are slowly making their way into the networking space. A lot of application guys and girls will know containerized applications. And they're slowly working their way into the space, as I said, with network automation applications such as Ansible being deployed as a network container, but also network elements such as Juniper's containerized SRX platform can be deployed as a container in cloud environments to allow integration within your network. Next slide, please. As a result of going through the process of automating sections or bits of the network, making network changes can become less challenging, but also the time to deployment can be improved. 15% of full automators and 18% of partial automators saying that it's significantly reduced their time for deployment from change request to deploying in production. This is due to network automation methodologies allowing secure deployment workflows with approval chains, automated configuration generation, as well as automated testing and deployment of that intent. Next slide, please.
So who wouldn't want time back, right, Alex? I mean, we've all got too much to do, and we all want our time back. And equally, there's some apprehension, I'm sure, when anybody clicks the button to deploy a change in a production environment. Talk us through how that can help from testing as well.
So network automation has many different aspects, and there's some terms within the industry that are being used at the moment, and we'll focus on a specific one called network as code. Network as code is derived from a popular term within the development operations silo called infrastructure as code, which is the management and provisioning of equipment within the infrastructure via an automated and repeatable process. Network as code utilizes the same principles as infrastructure as code by managing the network using a predefined state, which allows organizations to utilize and enforce best practices, making changes to the network that are less prone to unexpected or unplanned changes. But also moving to network as code allows engineers to embrace a more DevOps or codified network, which is currently being coined the term net DevOps or network reliability engineering practices of codifying your network to increase reliability, but also security. This comes with many different principles and benefits. If we go into the next slide, please. Thank you. There are several key principles and benefits that make up network as code and net DevOps, such as a source of truth, which is where we store declarative information, source control to allow code and information to be maintained and version controlled, APIs that allow us to integrate into different systems such as billing platforms, OSS platforms, southbound devices. We've also got continuous improvement and continuous deployment to manage and execute these changes to the network in a secure manner and also repeatable manner. We can use the same tests, we can use the same deployment methodologies. All these different components in the network can be easily reproduced and are consistently maintained with a consistent state. If done well, the devices can be disposable and interchangeable, variables are independent, and configurations can be derived from these vendor-agnostic variables. BGP is the same on most vendor platforms. We just have the variables that define a BGP neighbor, for example, and we can derive that into multiple different types of configuration. But also going one step further, there's open standards within the industry that allow us to do that. Deployment becomes a lot faster using these different tools, and the network can be self-documenting. Finally, there can be full accountability throughout the whole change process so that we can see who's making changes, what the proposed changes are, and what the impacts are because of automated testing. Next slide, please. So what are some essential requirements to make network as code achievable? A source of truth is important within network as code. A source of truth is a way of declaring state. There are many platforms within the industry that can do this. Often a source of truth is actually a combination of many of these platforms. Your spreadsheets that contain your IP addresses, that is a source of truth. That's where you define your IP addresses. But there's also other platforms such as CMDBs and data center infrastructure managers such as ServiceNow, Netbox, SolarWinds, and many more. API-based products allow for the integration between all these multiple platforms by gathering data from databases, etc. Zero-touch provisioning allows us organizations to set up greenfield sites rapidly. For example, we've got a project to do with a MIS solution, and this is great because we can define intent beforehand, and when onboarding a customer with missed access points, the configuration is already configured within the MIS platform and it can self-provision. But this is the same for standard Juniper switches, any vendor really. SDK, software development kits, and documentation to allow engineers to read code and quickly integrate in tooling such as interfacing with Meraki's APIs using Python or opening tickets automatically with ServiceNow, for example, using Python modules and etc. Continuous integration and continuous deployment tools is also important to not only test the integrations and the code function correctly, but to maintain consistency and also execute the changes to the network. Next slide, please. This slide shows a quick example of what I'm explaining here, of using GitLab to maintain a network using network as code principles, whereby changes can be proposed to the network using source control in branches. Once an approved CI/CD pipeline, once approved changes are approved, a CI/CD pipeline can pick up those proposed changes and test them. Does the Ansible playbooks function correctly? Are there any syntax errors? Does it provision to a test network correctly? Once this is all passed, the user can be notified, and the administrator, the person responsible for production approvals, can approve and merge this code into the master repository per se, and this will in essence trigger a pipeline to then run and test this code on production. So this whole process allows for security. We can see changes and what changes are being made, but also allows the full auditable process. We can see what's being changed, who is changing it. We can also see the test execution results. Next, please. So it's a little hard to see, but this shows a quick example of someone changing intent in the network in a codified manner by changing variables of a variable file. Next, please. Once this user has requested to change change configuration of the network, such as Internet 666, then a pipeline is run to stage this on a test network, as well as syntax check the changes being made, so that there's no user error within the proposed changes. Next, please. And this is just a quick result. You can see the different stages of the pipeline, and these are highly configurable. So we first test the syntax, and then we stage the configuration against the test network. Next, please. So overall, you can see the results of the execution jobs. You can look at the code that's being deployed. And next, please. And then we can see that it has been accepted by someone else, and then another pipeline is being run to merge this into the master repository, whereby it will also push to production in this example. Again, this is just a demo slides. These are fully customizable per customer and so forth.
So
Next,
Alec,
please.
you showed some examples there, and what about vendors' own tools? So you talked about Ansible, which very much comes from the DevOps background, and there are going to be some people here that are familiar with that. But is that the main tool? What's the benefit of using network vendors' own tools or security vendors' own tools?
I think when it comes to vendors' own tools, is that they do one thing very well, such as Juniper Contrail Service Orchestrator, for example, that can provision a data center very well. Now, over the top, we might want to supplement that with an additional orchestrator layer that integrates with other platforms. For example, we want to deploy the network using Contrail Service Orchestrator in Juniper, but we might also want to push applications to the servers at the same time, or update applications, which we might leverage something like StackStorm or Ansible Tower or and so forth to do this. So I think it's complementary. Different tools can be selected for the specific use cases, and letting different network element managers manage individual assets and having an overall orchestrator.
Sure. And if in case this seems a little bit scary, in case people think that they've got to learn a completely new language, so you've developed a whole program here to help people become automated. So we can look at what can be automated. We have what we call a jumpstart assessment, where we go and ask customers and we interrogate a little more about what those repetitive tasks, how many of those repetitive tasks can be automated. We find out how that might integrate within their operating environment. We can provide auditing, provide that single source of truth, and we also provide training so people can learn how to use these automation tools in their own environment. So it's not so scary, is it, after all, because we can show people how they can use these things for their benefit.
Correct. And I mean, there's been a big push in the industry towards network automation, because vendors are picking up automation practices as well, such as Juniper and Cisco have both come out with network automation certification tracks, which allows engineers to get involved in that, such as Juniper's NRE Labs, which allows a network engineer without any devices installed to be able to go and test out and run through different platforms. We also have our training that will go through Python, Ansible, and so forth.
Brilliant. Thanks, Alex. So we know that we've talked about things had to be automated, that we think that's a good thing, but some benefits aren't obvious, are they? Talk us through some of these.
Yeah, so there's some key benefits. Security is a key area of every business operating a network, and sensitive information and satisfaction is a key requirement. Implementing network as code can enforce approval workflows and automation practices, can follow industry standards such as ITIL change processes and many more. This allows for full auditability, so who, what, when, where, why. Overall, this can achieve less downtime within the network, and services can be implemented for users faster, and the network is secure and tested and deployed more rapidly. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Alex. And it sounds great. Sounds maybe too good to be true. So, Daniel, you're the SecOps expert. Tell us what's good and what's bad about this whole concept.
So automation is fantastic because it just does reduce human error. However, it's not necessarily the be all and end all in terms of security. Automation can help you identify errors, can assist with auditing and in some areas compliance, but you still need to have that ability to identify malicious attacks or anomalies that can come from both internal and external resources such as staff or students. Automation does allow you to work hand in hand with SOC appliances and provide you with that more of a guaranteed peace of mind and that overall view of what is going on within your environment. Could I have the next slide, please? So one of the things that we've identified within our organization is certain personas that can retrieve certain malicious or accidental threats to the environment. So I'll run you through two of those just now. The first one is Quentin. This is an individual that has access to very highly sensitive customer data, as well as intellectual property in terms of how they can access that data, how they can manipulate that data, and how they can cause either accidental or malicious harm to your environment. If we could just have the next slide, please. The next person is Disgruntled Dave. This could be a good example of this would be a student. It's an individual that's very bright, very ambitious, is very undervalued in terms of they're very undervalued in terms of they have a great understanding of how the IT infrastructure works and are very good at understanding how it's going to develop over time and what they have in place at that moment. So they're going to be wanting to push themselves. They're going to be wanting to see what's on their environment, what can they access, what can they get to. In some instances, these threats can be ignored very easily. If we could just move on to the next slide, please. So I'm just going to run you through a quick scenario or a flow process of how automation, auditing, and the SOC work hand in hand to provide you with that granularity overview of a scenario. So if you could just hit the next slide a few times, please. Thank you very much. So this scenario we're going to run through is a user that's either accidentally or maliciously got onto a networking device and has caused an outage or a breach. So if we just go to the next slide, please. Perfect. Thank you. So in terms of how the automation will work on that side, a log is generated to identify the change that needs to be made. This will be under continuous review of the whole entire process and even tested before implementation. When the implementation is made on the firewall at each stage, if the implementation is made on the firewall and it's found to be malicious, you can then review through the automation and proceed to roll back the changes made to reduce the risk or downtime. If we could go to the next slide, please, and just hit that a few times. From an audit trail, you can see that when the implementation is made, so this is again done from the automation side, the implementation is made, this is subject to peer review at every given stage of the implementation, so it's seen almost with a magnifying glass from those early stages prior to being rolled out on a live device. If that implementation is rolled out on a live device and that is seen to be either malicious or accidentally creating an anomaly within the event, that is subject to, again, constant review, which can then be rolled back at any given time. We can then further identify from the audit stage after the remediation a review of it with lessons learned, so we can identify how to prevent that happening in the future. So from the SOC team, in terms of how we all work together to provide that granularity, as Alex has advised earlier, we can see when the initial change is made from that user, so that we can see the who, the what, the when, the where. We will then take a snapshot of that configuration change or that event in question, which is what has caused the malicious activity or the event. And then the SOC can provide that for a granular analysis. So if anything has exceeded, so if this has gone into any other part of the architecture within the environment, we can then pull that all in together with other server resources and access resources to provide you with a full forensic analysis of the situation and scenario. Thank you. And I'll pass back to Andy.
Thanks, Daniel. So back to who's automating and why. Another chart here. We know it can give some time back. We know it can improve quality in testing. And this chart shows that those people that are automating, how they can exceed the goals once they've done so. Alex, is this something that we see within customers that are turning to automation? Are they starting to see the benefits?
Yes, correct. Customers that are starting to look into automation are starting to see small increases, even from not automating in production, maybe automating documentation changes or ingesting change requests and making declarative information from that. There's also the use case whereby users are starting to automate within their lab, so automate some testing that they do internally to allow, for example, when a new code release is released, that they can automatically get set up and tested in that environment with that new release of code quicker than they did before. So even if they needed to integrate because of have an upgrade on a core router, for example, if they have a lab whereby they test, and it typically takes a few weeks to test in some cases, this can be reduced using some automation practices. So it doesn't have to touch production, but yes, it can increase.
Excellent, thank you. We have the next slide, please, Fiona. So we heard of, excuse me, the acronym SOAR is Security, Orchestration, Automation and Response. And the key here is that automation is going to provide some operational efficiency. It's going to give you some time back. It's going to give you some certainty. But in a security concept, more than anything else, it's speed to recover, right? It's how quickly you can see a risk to the environment and recover from any potential breaches and correct any malware. Daniel, is that a good synopsis?
Yes, yeah, really good summary and all round on how everything can work to provide that unity, to provide you with granularity on the whole entire environment.
Thanks, Daniel. Alex, anything more to add before we finish?
No, not from me, thank you.
Okay, next slide, please. Thank you both. I know we're going to have some Q&A in a minute, and you can tell that I'm not the techie on here, so these two guys are hopefully going to be answering some of your questions. But thank you all for listening. John, over to you for questions.
Okay, thanks everyone. That was a really useful presentation. Particularly for me, I head up the Security Operations Centre in Jisc, and we're constantly looking at how we can automate our processes and our systems so we can be more effective. So yeah, very useful for me. Thank you. So I do have a couple of questions. There's one from Anthony Platt, which is I guess maybe directed at Alex. How do you start introducing traditional engineers to network as code if they have zero experience with code? Is there a good beginner's platform?
Yeah, so as I mentioned during the presentation, with vendors currently having a push towards automation, such as Juniper and Cisco with their certification programs, they've made great learning resources on behalf of having these certification programs in place. I also mentioned tools like Ansible. Now, Ansible is a way of being able to run kind of a network automation, but it allows for the user not knowing any code. They can create a file. They have an inventory file which declares what devices they want to configure, and then they use something called modules and playbooks to be able to derive intent in the network. It doesn't actually require to learn any programming language. It uses plain text YAML files, which is a kind of markup language. And it's plain text and easy to get going with. In terms of, is there a good beginner platform to start off with? Us as Axions, we do beginners Python courses, Ansible courses, all that type of good stuff. As well as there is a great resource by Juniper called NRE Labs. And you can just give that a Google, and that's a platform whereby they have Ansible material and run-throughs of different platforms to get started in network automation, such as Stackstorm, Robot Framework for testing, and different platforms. And what happens is you choose a specific kind of course to select, and it will spin up some devices for you to test on, as well as some kind of jump hosts. And all throughout your browser, you can go through a basic automation course without installing anything on your laptop or computer. So it's a great way to get started with full run-throughs and documentation. But again, we're also here to help out. We offer customers and partners our Slack channel, so that they have direct access to our PS consultants, whereby they can ask personal questions, as well as jumping on a meeting and running through something that doesn't quite go, it doesn't quite sit, as well as, again, formal courses.
That's great, thank you. This one's probably a question for me, maybe directed at Andy. For those of your customers that have been doing more automation and jumping onto this, have you seen them sort of reducing the number of staff, the number of engineers, or is it more of a case that they can then allow their engineers to do some more specific tasks that can't be automated?
It's a good question, and I think it's a fear that many people have. Honestly, I don't think I've seen any customer reduce staff because of automation. I've certainly seen a lot of resources being cut in many organizations, and people turning to automation because it's a last resort sometimes, because they just simply do not have enough time within their day to do all the things that need to be done. The number of incidents that are raised in security devices, the number of things that need to be dealt with on a daily basis, moves, adds, changes, simple things. It's just impossible now to keep up with it and to try and do everything manually the way we used to do it before. So if you want to have a dynamic environment where you're allowing people and services to move around and making sure that you're getting secure access to those services, we really see automation is the only way. We've not seen any evidence at all of people losing jobs because automation has been implemented. Quite the opposite. What it does is it starts to, I guess, take the brakes off and allow people to go and work on the strategic projects that have a bigger impact on the business, which then have to be resourced, because the stuff that we used to work on, all the BAU, has been taken care of by automation.
I think I can also add in there, if you go to our stand, you can download the Sonar report, and in there that they have evidence whereby engineers feel more valued, they're learning new skills that they're interested in, and they become more valued assets of the team, because they can know how to can learn how to code and so forth. So if anything, I think it improves engineers' frame of mind and satisfaction within work.
It's great. That's very interesting. Thank you. Haven't seen any other questions come in, so I'll give another couple of seconds in case anyone's still typing. But if not, thank you very much for your time, all three of you, and very interesting presentation. So this session is now over, and please can everyone click back to timeline, which you can find in the top menu bar, and please pop over to the virtual exhibition during the break. And if you want to know more about what's been discussed now, then the Actions exhibit stand will be there and manned and ready and waiting for you. So thank you, everybody. Enjoy the next session.